Welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Brian and Scott. Today's topic, amp talk, boutique amps, amps made by huge manufacturers, amp sims. We're going to talk about it all today on Rock Guitar Confidential. So, yes, I definitely never was much into Rick James as I was into Prince. I think Prince is... We'll have a discussion of that someday, but...
Yeah, Prince was great, but Rick James, man. Also as a producer...
Yeah, but Prince played all the instruments, man. He played literally every instrument. He played the drums, he played the bass, he played the keyboards, played the guitar, did all the vocals, engineered it. I mean...
Yeah, if I want the multi-instrumentalist in those genres, I'm going to go Stevie Wonder.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll get you. And they can't argue Stevie Wonder is great.
No, you cannot. Man, that's got to be a whole podcast right there.
I definitely have always been a fan of Prince, though, for sure. So,
I like Prince also.
Yeah.
I just, dude, Rick James, bitch.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
It
Rick
is
James.
a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, welcome to the Rock Guitar Confidential Podcast with Ryan and Scott. I am Scott Allen.
And I'm Ryan Bowe.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to be talking about a lot of rock guitar stuff. And today's topic is what, Ryan?
So today it's going to be all about amp talk.
Okay, so amps, amp sims, what kind of stuff, what our feelings are about amp culture in general, and like what would we bring to the gig with us, all that kind of stuff.
What
right?
are you bringing to the gig? Yeah, all that stuff.
So let's start off with probably the most common thing, which is real amps versus amp sims. Like, what are the feelings on that? What do you think?
Man, that's a tough one. I held out for decades.
Yeah, most of us did, really. Yeah,
absolutely. I remember when the Line 6 Axis 212 first hit the market.
Do you remember the Johnson modeling amplifiers?
Oh, I do. I sold a lot of Johnsons.
Yeah, I bet you did.
I did.
Back when you were hustling in the day.
That's right. Yeah. Well, so back to the Rick James influence. So Johnson was it was basically the Digitech.
Yeah.
Version of the modeling amplifier. So it was basically a DSP 2101 preamp,
but hooked up to a speaker and a power amp.
Yeah, exactly right. Attached to like a solid state power amp. Maybe it was a Class D switching transfer. I don't know, but those amps were cool because instead of typical amp covering, they had like truck bed liner.
Yeah,
it was sprayed on.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were pretty indestructible, but alas, they did not sound good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those guys were pretty mind blowing, though. The idea that you can have one amp where you can just turn a dial and make it sound, at least in theory, like a Fender Twin or a Vox or a Marshall Plexi or a Marshall JCM 2000 or something. You could like just turn a knob and make it sound like that.
Right.
And with all of effects you can have programming, different sounds and stuff. That was pretty mind blowing. The Line 6 stuff, like the Flex Tone. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
That was
absolutely.
A really big deal. That was kind of the start of it. And then that's when, right around that same time is when people all started switching over to using only DAWs for recording rather than using like a Fostex or something like that. And I think that kind of went hand in hand. And then as computer technology got better, then we started getting amp sims. You just could go ahead and load on the computer.
I remember specifically when Line 6's Pod Pro, a 2-space rack mount thing came in.
I know exactly.
I remember when the first ones showed up at the store. Of course, I went ahead and took one and put it in the rack of doom in the guitar department.
Yeah, just so you can show it off and stuff.
Yeah, it came back the next day and it was missing because the guys in Pro Audio said it was for them.
Oh, what?
And man, I was pissed.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, that was amazing, though. I mean, I remember I had a pod, too, like everybody else, and it's one of those things where you kind of, like, the idea that you can just turn a dial and have the sound there with it. And not only that, but it also had the speaker sims as well. I mean,
the speaker sim was a big deal, too. That's actually what kept me away from modeling for the longest time.
But things are so good now, though, man. We've gotten to the point now where the plugins are so good.
Yeah, the Neural DSP stuff we've been using on the forthcoming X Aegis album.
Yeah, I mean, it's so good.
Great.
Like, it's you can sit there and you can move mics around all day long or do combinations of condenser and dynamic mics and mix it in such a way, but you really could just plug it in and do a drive. And you can reamp so easy using plugins too. I mean, it's
you just need a lot of processing power in your computer. Yes, because latency is the enemy.
It is.
That would be, that would be one thing. Right?
I mean, I think if everybody had like all the financial and time, resources available, everyone would like to have 10 or 15 different amps with like 6 or 7 different speaker cabinets with every combination of mic that you can think of. I remember reading a story that Warren DeMartini, when they were recording Invasion of Your Privacy, took like a week just getting guitar sounds. That's like all they did in the studio. $3,000 a day in the studio, just getting guitar sounds. You know what I mean? Which is the dream. I think everybody would like to do that. But like 9 times, think this way: the music industry doesn't exist in terms of making money from recording anymore.
Right.
So it's this, to sit there and spend $100,000 in the recording studio for something that's never ever going to have a chance of recouping that money is just throwing good money after bad nowadays.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like a smaller artist, you're not going to. There's no return on that. So the plugins, and this is really even down to things like Easy Mix, some of the suites you can download that allow you to get like entire signal chains that like people like Chris Lord Alge used, or like Andy Sneap. I mean, you can get such pro sounds so easily for not much money anymore. So the idea of going and spending,
I think Easy Mix is like $150
exactly,
or less.
and you get different suites with like full Neve console models and stuff like that. You could really get 90% of the way there of that, or you can spend $100,000 in the studio. Like, let me think.
If you have the processing power.
I don't know why anyone uses that anymore, other than people who just have an affectation for using analog gear and they have the money to do it. Then go for it. But I mean, short of that,
you don't have a live room and good mics and stuff like that.
There's no reason to. It's
and on top of that, I still think there's also still the trend of kind of overkill on all of that stuff. Well, and here's what I mean by that. We've talked in a previous podcast about the music retail industry and all of the pedals that are out there, and those becoming distractions for players who care about being good.
Yep.
I also, when I made the switch, at least, and to be specific, I'm only making the switch to amp Sims for recording purposes.
Yep.
Whenever I go out and perform any of this stuff, it's going to be with a real, actual guitar amplifier.
Yeah, look at almost two different worlds. If you're recording, you want to have instant access to a lot of tones without having to worry about mics and pulling up, preamps and whatnot. You want that built into the DAW.
Well, that and actually, I just want access to a few good tones.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have to worry about mic placement or how does my room sound.
You spend all day moving a mic
stuff,
around,
right?
and it's. I've done. I mean, I'm sure we're both in the situation where we were lucky enough when we were first starting out recording that we were in studios with engineers with mics moving things around. You know what I mean? And that it was interesting. And I mean, I had a great experience. My first album I did, actually, Frank Hannon from Tesla was producing that album.
Awesome.
So it was one of those things where he knows his business when it comes to that stuff, and it was eye-opening learning how to okay, how does he want me to record this? How is he placing the mics? What are the different mics we're putting? What's a room sound? What is the close mic in the speaker cone versus off access? What's a condenser sound like? What's a dynamic sound like? You can only get that from experience doing that. And then what I found is that the plugins nowadays really are like so good. I mean, they've already got that stuff in the bag. You walk in the door, the tone's right there.
Right. Well, but and then if you decide to mess with any of those microphones or positions virtually, you know what you're doing because you've done it for real.
Yeah.
And that helps a ton, right?
And there's still an element of experimentation too, like figuring out what this is, because maybe I'd never used a certain kind of mic or like a certain kind of ribbon mic or something before, and it gives me a chance to kind of explore what that sounds like. Not just me, but everybody. I mean, it's so accessible. Everybody in the world can have that technology. If you have a good, powerful laptop, and you can do it. So I think that I don't think it's an either-or proposition. I think people who are well-heeled and have, a $100,000 budget to record with, they can go in there and spend a week get hard amp sounds and figure out what mics they want. If you're most other musicians who have not all the time in the world, not all the money in the world, then using things like plugins are smart because it's just so efficient. And you can reamp later if you decide you don't like it. You can have a dry signal. You can go ahead and reamp that sucker with a different plugin if you want. And the plugins are going to keep getting better. It's not like they're going to go the other way. You know what I mean? It's going to get to the point where it's going to be completely indecipherable whether it's a real amp or a plugin. You know what I mean? And
so there's an interesting perspective on this where I think every guitar player needs to have a real all-tube amp at least at some point in their life.
I mean, that's what most people. I mean, nowadays you can actually get a really decent tube amp for not a ton of money. It's not like back in the day.
Anything Black Star makes is great.
Yeah, a PV is the same way, by the way. I'll say like the PV 6505, 6534s, the 3120s. Those are really, really great amps. I have a huge fan of the 6534. which is basically it's the 6505 series from PV is essentially the 5150 amp. It's the Eddie Van Halen original 5150. The regular 6505 had 6L6 power tubes in it. The 6534 has got EL34 power tubes in it, and I've always been more of a fan of EL34 power tubes.
Yeah, a little more brittle.
Yeah, a little more British. It's got that kind of mid
British.
Yeah, it doesn't have the high sizzle like the 6L6. I mean, they're both great, and I have both. I have a 6505 that's got 6L6s, and I've got a 6534 with EL34s.
Are you chuffed to bits over
I'm
the
chuffed.
EL34s?
It's all rubbish, really.
Chip,
Think
chip,
about
chiree.
it. It's all rubbish. I'm so sorry. Anyone listening is in England. We're just a couple of dudes from California doing horrible British accents. We love your country.
Right.
We do.
We think it's keen as mustard.
It's true. It's the buttons, you know?
Old chap.
All right.
So,
But anyway, what I'm trying to say though is that the 34s. I mean, this is all about taste. Like having power tubes, the way that affects. Well, let's put it this way: when it comes to amps, you have the preamp, which is going to be where a lot of your more distorted sounds are going to come from, and then the power amp is which builds it up to the big loud sound that you want. They work in concert. The way that the vintage amps used to work is there wasn't a whole lot going on in the preamp. They might only have 2 preamp tubes in it,
right?
And then they'd have a really powerful power amp section. So, which all the guitarists in those days would do is crank everything all the way and develop what's called power amp saturation.
Yes,
which is kind of the AC/DC style distortion where really you have to hit it hard and it gives you that sound. But the problem is there's not a ton of sustain, and all the tones are very kind of brittle. You can't get that violin type singing thing. So Eddie Van Halen and other guitarists in that time period too kind of figured out is if you put a Variac on there and you lower the voltage and you still crank it all the way, you can get an even fatter, warmer, distorted sound and start getting more into that sort of violin type sustain. And then once Eddie showed you could do it, then every amp builder in the world started trying to build more and more preamp gain into their amps.
Yes, and didn't Eddie also add a preamp tube?
On the 5150, yes, but on the original Plexi, no.
Okay.
So he just had it modded by Jose Arredondo, and they did like a thing. It was a cascading gain stage thing. It was some kind of crazy thing.
Yes.
I mean, then he kind of obviously with the 5150 took the distortion to a whole nother level. I'm still a huge fan of the PV6505 stuff, which is essentially the same thing as the 5150.
Yeah, the same circuit.
And it's so affordable and so killer, man. As far as bang for the buck, it's really hard to beat that. You know, that's kind of the gold standard for a lot of metal bands is that amplifier. It reminds me a little bit of like a Soldano, but it's like more a readily attainable version of that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good assessment.
You know, and the Soldanos are great, obviously, but they're hard to find and
many
they're
thousands
very
of
very
dollars.
expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can get like 90% of the Soldano with a 6505 for $1,200 or whatever. You know what I mean? And that's just such an obvious thing.
Or you can download the amp sound.
That's true. But if you want the real amp, though.
Right.
And then one thing I really am a big fan of is lately, in like the last 10 years, the whole lunchbox amp thing has become a thing. And that's so great. It is such a good thing. And then
we're talking like the Orange Tiny Terror.
Yeah, the one I have is the 6505 Mini. That one, and that one's really cool. And it has even a power selection, so you can go down like 2 watts. You know, that kind of, it's just so great. It's 25 watts if you max it out, or you can go down to like 2 if you want to keep it. And it's 2 watts in the room is still plenty loud. So
so for our
amps, I mean,
so for our listeners out there that are wondering why you would want to knock the wattage down, it has to do with how loud will you be before the signal distorts. Yes.
And if you can really push that power section more, if it's only got a ceiling of 2 watts, you can crank that thing, and it's not going to be a crazy ceiling as far as the noise. It's not going to be so loud that you can't stand next to the amp. You know.
So the whole story of the electric guitar sound that we know and love in rock music, it's the sound of guitarists forcing their amplifiers to do stuff they weren't designed to do.
Yep.
And that's why we still use tubes at all.
And people finding out how did that happen and how can we make that better and more precise to what people want.
Right. And the benefit of all that breakup and distortion and overdrive, as it's called, is sustain.
Yep. Which allows guitar players to play lines like saxophonists and violinists, which it was not something. Yeah, or singing. Yeah, vocal lines.
Yep.
Because before that, guitar was really more like percussive because there wasn't any sustain. You
right.
know what I mean? So you had to play like fast lines or lines that had rhythmic interest, but
you were just a rhythm player in a big band with like 12 other people.
And the horns took care of the melodies.
Right. Kind of and like that sucks.
Yeah, no one wants that. No one wants that.
No, not at all.
And then the guitar, once I think Van Halen really changed the game in so many ways, not just playing, but his tone. People didn't realize you could make a guitar sound like that. You know, I mean, to a lesser degree, I'd say Brian May from Queen in a similar way.
Well, Jimi Hendrix is kind of the first guy that started really fuzzing things up.
Yeah, that's true. You could give him that. But Eddie's the one that really took it to that next spot where it was like violin style sustain. And I think after Eddie came out, everybody for 30 years, it's still to this day is trying to get that tone. You know what I mean?
The Brown sound.
Yeah. And then everyone's kind of, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? It's like, it's amazing. And there's entire industries now built on trying to get a Brown sounding amp. There's so many out there that's their thing. They're trying to get that overdriven plexi sound, which everyone loves.
Yes.
It's kind of crazy. But so I think when it comes to recording, though, most of us are not going to be pulling out a 100-watt tube amp and miking. I mean, how many people are even in a position
Well, we've tried.
Well, we've done it. And
we've done it.
We've actually gotten better results with the plugins, which is kind of crazy. But
Absolutely.
I mean, even if you think about someone's living in an apartment, they're trying to record a demo. They're not going to bust out their half stack and try and record it, in an apartment with a neighbor right next door. That's just being an a-hole, basically.
So here's where I'm going to totally put the plug for the Neural DSP plugins.
There you go.
It's it's not perfect, and again, you have to have a lot of processing power. But the thing I really like is that you can just download what they call an archetype. So for example, we've got that Soldano SLO 100 archetype. It's got a bunch of presets in it from other artists. It comes with a virtual delay pedal and a virtual reverb pedal.
Yeah, you can spice up your sound a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. But I much prefer that to... Well, plus it's affordable, right? You're talking like maybe $140, $150 for that plug-in.
You're totally right, yeah.
And then you've got one amp that sounds awesome.
Yep.
With a variety of different presets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's good for me. I would rather select a handful of amplifiers I know I'm going to use all the time than pay a couple $1,000s for 100 amps and 50 different flangers.
I've said that for about like
300
modeling amps too. When the whole this debate about modeling amps versus tube amps, I'm like, well, okay, if I buy a tube amp, it does one thing. If I buy this modeling amp, it may not do everything perfectly, but it does like 15 things. You know what I mean? And it's just there's no argument to be made unless you have just a ludicrous amount of money and you can spend. Well, gee, I could spend $400 in this amp, or I can spend $30,000 to get the 100% of this.
Yeah, right. Totally.
It's like such a no-brainer. You know what I mean?
And how many times have you had a student ask, "Hey, how should I set the knobs on my amp?"
Yeah, all the time.
Can I take a picture? Or, dude, just put the bass, middle, and treble dead in the middle, and then add more or less gain.
You know what's funny?
There you go, folks.
I actually have a different setting for my EQ than Ryan does. I actually do the bass around 9 or 10, and then I do the middle about 4 and the treble about 6. That's kind of my setup right there, and then I will modify to taste on that amplifier. But that's a very subjective thing. I kind of look at like start here and then just move the knobs until it sounds good.
Okay,
I mean
that's a totally reasonable approach.
And everyone's ear is so different too. Like some person, like a certain person, like all they hear is treble for some reason.
I do have friends that are great players. Well, actually, I'm one of those guys that hears treble, or I want to hear treble.
Yeah,
like
the mids just make things muddy, right?
Like the presence knob is like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, and then it's funny you get this war between the presence and the resonance knob because you're like turning like, no, I don't like that, and you kind of keep changing degrees of it. Yeah, but I mean, it's so funny. I think for a lot of like younger people who are just getting the amps, I just try and here's a good clean sound, here's a good crunch sound, here's a good lead sound, and this is kind of how the knobs do this, and you got to go play with it until you figure out what you like because everyone's a little different on that.
But don't play with it too long because you need to get to the actual playing.
Yes, get a workable sound and then work from there.
Yeah, exactly. Like play with it till it sounds good and then never touch it again would be best.
That's so funny. That's true though. You have to at some point just walk away and say, okay, that's as good as it's going to get. And the same thing goes with like pedals too. Like I'm going to get like, oh, I got this new overdrive pedal. It's going to be amazing. It's like, well, maybe, but are you practicing? Are you playing? That's like that's the thing that matters the most.
So there's a recurring theme there. So yeah, so I've got to say I'm really impressed in a recording context with where amp sims are now. But yeah, man, if I'm gonna go play in front of anybody, then I want a tube amp.
So let's get into that. What would you bring to the gig? Let's go down not only your amp but your signal chain and your guitars. Let's talk about your gear for a gig. What do you take with you?
So for the longest time I used half stacks because I think nothing replaces the sound of a straight 412 cabinet.
Yep.
I've got my trusty Marshall 1960B that I guess now it's kind of a Marzen because the
Marnell.
Yeah, because the logo's been falling off.
That makes it cool, man. That means it's been used.
Oh, dude, totally, man. Used by me and Buck Dharma of Blue Oyster Cult.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, man.
You know what I like about Buck Dharma is no matter what happens, he never fears the Reaper.
No, he doesn't.
Nope.
No, not at all, man. Dude, his solos always take me away.
And it's so true. You know what's funny is like when he was making burgers for us at the cookout, he was burning for us. It was amazing.
He was burning for you.
That's true. That's
not
true.
me so much.
I wasn't trying to be so self-centered. Yeah.
Yes, and he survived the Psychic
It's
Wars.
so true. It's true. And, and it's funny. I remember after that, we all watched the Godzilla festival. It was
We
amazing.
did. That was great.
As we all know, history told us again and again.
Yeah, there
how
goes
nature
Tokyo.
points out the folly of man. It's,
Yes, that's right.
And then we had a whole long philosophical discussion about it. It was
Ooh,
great.
and you know what? Well, man, the folly of man. I can't wait to get back to our What the Kids Are Listening To episode.
That will happen shortly.
But it will happen soon. So anyway, so I digress. So for the longest time, I hauled my trusty, well, for 24 years, I hauled my trusty Marshall 412 and whatever amp head I was using at the time.
That's so funny. I've got the speakers and this whatever amp.
Yeah, well, hey, there's a good point, too, because that speaker cabinet sounds fucking great. And
that shows, yeah.
And it doesn't matter what head I
So
had
is that
on
just
it.
vintage 30s in there?
I think they're actually 75s.
Well, 75 watt, but vintage 30s or 70 watts. 75
Yeah, like
watt
the
speakers,
the Celestion GT 75 or whatever.
Yeah.
There's some mythology about some of the guys at the shop rewiring the innards with monster cable, which I don't know. Maybe this is the one or not. I've had the back put back on it by a technician before. I've had the input jacks replaced.
That gets into things like impedance, and I start fading out when people talk about impedance levels, and I'm like, okay, I don't understand what we're talking about here anymore. I know it's electrical resistance, I get
resistance, yes.
but it's like
make sure you don't ever turn on your tube amplifier head without a speaker load on it, or else
for
it'll
sure.
burn itself out.
But when it gets into the differences
So-
between like speaker cables and stuff, and I'm like, just which one is the good sounding one? Give me that
Well,
one.
I spent a lot of years selling $100 guitar cable. Like an 18
Monster
yeah,
cable?
like
Yeah.
Monster Cable, and there was another company called MIT for a while,
Yeah, I use George L's, and that's a similar thing. Yeah.
also high end. What is an 18-foot George L cable typically
Oh,
run?
I have an endorsement of that company. I don't know how much it costs for everybody else.
Well, then I guess I'll quit offering my opinions about high end cables.
I mean, I
'Cause
like
it's
them.
changed over the years.
I like them. You know what? The one thing I would say though is George L. The one thing that I don't like is they have the ones that you make yourself. That they're just not as reliable as the ones that are pre-made. Like
Well, because in a cable, it's all about the ends. Like a cable doesn't break in the middle of the cable.
it's
it
the
breaks
connections
on
between the cable and
right.
yeah, and that's I think there's almost no way to make a solderless cable without having issues with reliability.
Yeah, making a cable myself doesn't sound very appealing.
I did a whole pedal board like that, and then what happened is I had the joy of discovering that when it wouldn't make any sound, which cable was bad. I had
Yeah.
to go through every cable and figure out what it's going to be. But we're getting pretty far afield from which rig this
Yeah,
is.
so the
what
rig-
amp would you typically take with you? What would you say? What was like your top 2 or 3 amps that you would be using with that?
Well, so for the longest time, so it's always been, not all, up until about 10 or 11 years ago, it was my trusty Marshall 412 and whatever amp head that I had at
what
the
would be an
time.
example of some of the amps you've had?
So for a while, I had a Gensbenz El Diablo, which is a much maligned.
Yeah, Gensben stuff was pretty cool. I remember playing some of those.
You know what?
Yeah.
It was well built, but the problem with those, I think, for a lot of consumers, was that it was an active EQ. So if it was right in the middle, it wasn't at 5; it was at 0.
Sure.
And so if you turn it to the left, you'd be on -1,
Yeah.
or to the right.
It wasn't an
you'd be
active
+1.
setup, but it was just a like a
Yeah, well,
multi-band EQ.
Yeah, multi-band EQ. So
Yeah.
a lot of So again, if you're the knob twisty kind of player, or a novice player that doesn't really know what all that means,
Yeah.
there were a lot of people out there dialing in really bad
I
tones
can't
on that
understand how
amp.
to make this sound good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the modern amplifier manufacturer, no matter who it is, this is why I'm the proponent of starting with the flat EQ at least. I mean, you can season it after that, but the modern amplifier manufacturer makes their amplifier to sound most like itself flat. And then you season it to taste a little bit. If we're talking about older amplifiers, like the Plexis and the high watts,
Well, those are just one sound basically. You just gotta like turn everything up all the way, and
you have to
get out of
season
the-
it a lot more. The EQ makes a lot more of a difference.
You gotta get out of the room though. You can't stay next to an amp like that. You
Oh
have
god,
to-
a high watt, yeah, you'll kill yourself.
Yeah, you have,
yes.
to have to be in another room playing.
Yeah,
it,
you'll murder yourself with sound waves.
yeah, it's true.
Yes. So,
You know what's got murdered with sound waves? Optimus Prime.
I thought it was Starscream.
Ah, damn, I don't know who killed Optimus Prime. That's right.
Well,
Just-
Transformers, man, dude, great soundtrack by Lion to
You
the
got it.
1986 movie.
You got
Hell
it.
yeah, dude, Transformers. Thanks for listening to Rock Guitar Confidential with Scott and Ryan. Please make sure to like and subscribe like your life depended on it. But anyway, so my issue with that amplifier and why I got rid of it is that it had a boost on it, but it was a pre-gain boost, not a volume boost.
That's weird. So you have more distortion in the preamp.
Right, more distortion in the preamp, right? But that's not what I needed.
Yeah, it's going to make it muddier. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went and I got a Carvin V3. And the reason I bought the Carvin V3 is that the 3 channels are identical.
Okay.
So you can dial a clean channel. They've got the same EQ options, gain.
So it's like the same amp 3 times, basically.
Or actually, no, I'm sorry. There's a clean channel, and then the 2 gain channels are identical. So you can easily set up a rhythm channel. You can easily set up a lead channel. The reverb was assignable.
Okay. Is that spring or is that like a tank or what was that?
I think it is.
Sometimes it's digital too.
I think it's a spring reverb.
Okay.
So that part was cool, but it had an adjustable 20 dB boost to just it didn't color your tone. It just made you louder.
Yeah, it's a clean boost.
Yeah, it's a clean boost.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted for leads. I just wanted to, honestly, I set up one high gain channel, and then I back the volume on my guitar off for crunchy rhythms.
Yeah.
When it's time to go for a solo, I hit the boost and roll the volume all the way up on my guitar, and that's for my lead.
Yep.
When I jump out of my lead, I just reduce the boost and then cut my guitar volume back a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was my approach for the longest time. I eventually replaced that setup with just a Blackstar ST60 combo, just a 112 60 watt combo. Same thing. It had an adjustable boost on it, and I used the same approach.
Sure.
And I also have a 5153.
Yeah.
But that's
the power. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that was actually more just for studio stuff. I happened upon it.
Yeah. It was great amps.
Got a killer deal. Yeah. Some guy came into the shop and sold all of his stuff. He bought his whole band all of their gear.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So one day I showed up at the shop for work, and it was a 6505, a 5153, cabinets. He just sold it all to the store. So
just trying to get out of the business or something. Was that?
He just sold. He was the bass player, but he had bought the rigs for his guitar players, and the band broke up. So he took the amps back.
That might
and
be the
sold
greatest bass player ever. Are you kidding me?
Dude, I'm telling. Well, I mean, the bass player. I mean, yeah, man. He's like, dude, I need to be good for something. I'll buy all the gear.
Thank you. That's the number one thing you can do as a bass player.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah. And the thing too is that he had debadged everything. My 5153 didn't have any of the logos on it, and the guy had put a Punisher sticker over the red jewel light, which I, of course, promptly scraped off upon taking.
What was the advantage to doing that? Was he like going to be doing a lot of TV gigs, or you want to like give people promotion or something? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah, I have no idea, man. People do dumb stuff. So that meant the resale value on the amp was crap.
Yeah, of course.
So that works for me. I won't say what I paid for it, but I paid very little for it.
Yeah, that's a great amp though.
Totally great amp. So anyway, so I switched from using the half stacks to play live to like a 112 tube combo. Yeah. And I gigged around. The Blackstar amp was great.
What's the rest of your signal chain in that? Like, what are you using, pedals and guitars and stuff?
So my signal chain was whatever super strat I was playing, right? So I've got a few RGs and I've got a few Carvin Kiesels.
Yeah.
Or a couple Carvin Kiesels. So whatever super strat that had humbuckers and coil taps on it.
And Floyd.
And a Floyd, right? Yeah. And then that I would plug that. I would use my guitar cable to plug that into the amplifier, and then out my speaker. That's my signal chain.
So you didn't use any pedals, no overdrives, no delays, no wah.
Fuck no.
Wow, that's amazing, man. Just straight to the amp. I mean, talk about simplicity. I mean, that's
and again, this is just my personal philosophy, but that's all I want. I want every note to pop. I don't, if I'm playing in a room, then the room's going to have natural reverb. So very, very light reverb on a clean tone. But I mean, even on lead tones for those gigs, there's going to be some natural reverb in the room.
And the front of house might throw some delay or reverb on it too.
That's right. Yeah. So my own personal philosophy is dry. I just want gain, maybe just a touch of reverb on a clean tone. But if I'm playing in front of people, you're going to hear every single note just right between the eyes.
That's amazing.
And again, that's just my personal philosophy.
That makes sense, man.
Yep. Man. So my signal chain is guitar into amp.
That's so cool. I mean, that makes the things as simple as it gets, especially loading in and out. My God.
Totally.
You know,
And I
just-
mean, I've got the foot switch for the amp in front of me, so I mean, there's a little bit of tap dancing involved, but very minimally. And you know, to go back to the amp sim thing, having that personal philosophy is why I like just being able to buy. Here's one amp.
Yeah.
I want one amp. So we've been using the Fort and Cali suite
Yeah.
on the forthcoming Ex Aegis album,
Yep.
which is present on most of the rhythm guitar tracks.
Yeah.
It doesn't even come with the virtual delay or reverb pedal.
That's
I
just dry.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
That's so cool, man. Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So you just basically you just want a decent tube amp with a nice, you know, 2 preamp, 2 power section, you know, 3 channels preferably, that kind of thing. That makes all the sense in the world. You know, it's funny. I've gone through an evolution on my end because I used to use a much bigger rig. It's going to be so much over the top compared to your. Oh my God, dude! For like when I would do gigs, I remember really up till probably the last 4 years I've changed this, but before that, the previous like 15 years, my rig was I did a dry wet cab, so I had 2 412s and basically a refrigerator sized rack with 2 heads in it. I had like a Lexicon MPX 100. I got a DBX compressor. I had Sonic Maximizer in there, and I had a pedal drawer.
Ooh, the Maximum Sodomizer.
And I had a pedal drawer with a harmony pedal. Some of my songs had harmony parts, so I would do those live with a harmonizer. And then I had an overdrive pedal, and then on my floor I had my MIDI controller, my custom audio electronics MIDI controller, because I had it all set up for MIDI switching. So if I hit a button, it would be like a bunch of stuff change, like all the amp channels, because I'm using 2 amps at the same time, 1 amp dry, 1 amp with effects. And so when they would mic up my stuff, they'd mic up 2 cabinets, and one was a wet cab, one was a dry cab, and then whoever the front of house guy was, they could just mix it. So if it's a dry room, they can go with the dry cab more. If it's a wet room, or if it's a dry room, they can use more of the wet cab. If it's a wet room, they can use more of the dry cab. So that gives the front of house person a little bit more kind of flexibility.
Sure.
I'm not a fan of dry sound.
and hopefully you've got a front of house person that is really good.
Yes, and that doesn't always happen.
Right.
So it's one of those things that I had that, and then I would have all the stuff set for MIDI. So I'd have like 4 tones. I'd have clean sound, and I have a dry rhythm sound. I had a heavy rhythm sound, and I have one with various different effects, like different harmonizer effects and stuff like that. And so to play the stuff I was playing, I had to have all those things. But it was pretty big. I mean, obviously the rack weighed about 100 pounds, 150 pounds.
Oh, I went through my rack system days.
That plus 2 412s plus 2 guitars plus my pedal board. It was a lot.
Yikes.
And it worked great. It sounded awesome. Everyone always was like, man, your tone's unbelievable. I'm like, well, yeah, it's 2 tube amps running at the same time,
Right.
And then what in the last 5 years I've done is I've really scaled it down, like immensely scaled it down to the point where now I've just got a single 212 cab, PV cab, and I have a 6505 mini with 25 watt amp.
Sounds killer.
Which is all you need.
Yeah, man.
And then I have like 3 pedals. I have like a delay pedal, I have an overdrive and a wah, and that's about it. And I got a couple phaser and flangers, but I almost never use. They're just there.
I did use a wah for a while because I had to play. "Let's Get Crazy" by Prince.
I do use a wah a lot actually. And I've used my Morley, bad
Morley's
horsey
great stuff. I
wahs.
loved it.
Those are the ones I use. The switchless wah, which is awesome. And then I think I have a thing for MXR pedals. So I got like an MXR super badass overdrive. I got the MXR Phase 90, the MXR flanger, and then I got the Boss HR2 harmonizer, which is what I use for my harmonized parts. And then really just that, it's just basically it's a pedal board with like 5 pedals on it, and then a 25 watt amp, and I just run that stuff in the effects loop, and I'm good to go.
So the
HR2, I found that actually works better than my full. I mean, not better, but it's like equivalent to the 2 412s with a refrigerator sized rack. It actually works just as well, in my opinion. And I'm a big fan of analog delays. So the one I'm using is the oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm remember. It's the MXR delay. I can't remember what it's called. It's an analog delay. It's really, I can't believe I'm spacing on what it is. Sorry, MXR. It's the analog delay everyone uses. Carbon copy.
The carbon copy.
Yeah. So that one's it. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask about that HR2 harmonizer. Don't you have to set it for a certain key in order for it to...
It's a smart harmonizer. Instead of the 2 different pit, you can do like I usually go a third above and then an octave above as well. That kind of thing, or below, depending on what the thing is. And I just have it on my set list. I'll have the different songs with the different keys, so I'll just change it before the song.
Got it.
That kind of thing. Because it's either that or get an Eventide for $3,000, and I'd rather spend $300 on an HR2, and it does the same job. Yes, I have a little bit of legwork I have to do. And then I plug that in with my George L cables.
Nice.
And then I use my VGA electric guitars. My number one is a Excalibur Custom, which is a Floyd Rose, and I just love that. The guitars are the best, man.
So now when you Did you have to go to the factory in Europe and actually pull the guitar out of a stone?
No.
Like, and then like if you can pull it out, then that gets to be yours.
I can tell you the way that Patrice Vigier, who's the guy who owns the company, is he would never allow anybody to have that kind of input. He's like, no, I will get the guitar to be perfect for you.
That reminds me, there was this really great pho restaurant that I used to go to back in the day where no matter what you ordered, the old man that owned the restaurant would be like, no, you want this.
When you have a
Like,
master luthier like that, they
Yeah.
know what they're doing. You know
Totally.
what I mean?
He's like the master chef of guitars. That's
So-
cool. I
and that
appreciate
guitar is like the can do everything guitar. It's the best.
Killer
thing.
guitars,
It's the
man.
best guitars you can get. I mean, they're not cheap for people who are walking in the door, but you get what you pay for to a large degree.
That's right.
You know, Lamborghinis and Maseratis aren't cheap either. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean? So, but you get what you pay for. You know, but I mean, the amps though, I use a PV6505. You know what I mean? And it's just that with a 112 or a 212 cabinet. Actually, let me tell you, man, my back is really safe. Has really been grateful. Because and then honestly, you don't need the power. Like unless you're playing a really big club,
Yeah.
you don't need to have a ton of volume. And if you're playing at a big venue, then maybe. But even then, you don't need it.
Yeah, dude. Even
Yeah.
that Black Star ST60 soloist I was playing through, like it was still a big 112. I mean, it's smaller than what I had before, but I remember getting booked to play on a barge out in the river, where so you had to load.
Wait,
your,
was this a sentence or was this?
Dude, I'm telling you, man, it was out on the Sacramento River.
I played on a barge down by the river.
Yar. You know, there's a bunch of people like doing pirate cosplay, and so there's the barge that's out in. I live in a barge down by the river. Yeah, and so you'd have to get in like I guess maybe it was like a speedboat, and so
Wow, you had a speedboat out to the barge?
or it was right.
It's in James Bond shit.
Well,
man.
yeah, well,
we had a parachute from 30,000 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a big banana boat. You know, it was, dude, it was great, and so I don't know. I mean, it wasn't really. I don't know. It was a fishing boat, so it was a boat. So you had to get in this one boat with your amp and your guitar cases and whatever it was, right? So I usually have like a luggage bag that had cables and my foot switch in it, and
Yep.
extra set of strings and all that kind of crap, right? Then my ST60, and then and at least two guitars, one main and one backup, right?
Yeah, you definitely need to have main
Yeah,
and backup
two.
for-
By the way, two basically identical guitars.
Yeah.
Right. For redundancy's sake.
Yeah, because you want it to feel the same.
Yeah,
You know?
I want to have the same cable. I want the
Yeah.
switches to all do the same stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's there's a whole other podcast,
Yeah.
perhaps. So you get in that boat, and they sell you out, and then the barge was like 8 feet high from where you boarded. So then you had to lift your gear up to someone, and then they had to help you up on top of the barge.
Ah.
Yeah.
Please tell me they were singing the jaunty shanty when they did like, yo ho ho,
Oh,
we're lifting the gear. you
Right.
know,
Yes.
kind
It's a roadie's life for me.
this be a landlubber's gear.
Yar,
You know?
mateys.
Yeah.
Right, totally. And yeah, the MC was a parrot. Thanks for coming out, Squawk.
Mr. Pickles. What was one? Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Pickles. There's another podcast. But for those of you who don't know, Mr. Pickles is the greatest animated show of all time. It's on Hulu. Gather the family around.
Particularly
and-
the little ones, right?
Yeah, totally, dude. Yeah, well, the kids need to be introduced to gore and horror somehow, right? Yeah, totally, man. You can't.
I'm sorry, we're totally going to
You
far
can't,
field.
you can't feed them that Muppet Babies shit forever.
Sometimes they have to learn about the world. the
Hey,
hard
you
way.
know what?
Yeah.
Mr. Pickles always defended his best friend, the boy character in the show.
Okay, fair
Like
enough.
that's so whatever Mr. Pickles is doing, whatever mass murder or satanic ritual, it's all in service of protecting his boy master.
Fair enough. Right
So Mr.
So
Pickles
tell me, I want to hear about the
had
barge though, man.
character.
Let's get into that. I mean,
Yeah, well, so we just man. So you had to sail out to, and so that's when I really wished perhaps I had something even smaller. But you know what? It goes. So really, my two reasons for owning that amp: one was it had a clean boost.
yeah.
Two, it was still a big enough cabinet with a 12-inch speaker in it. So I guess when it comes to amps, I really am concerned with, I've been more concerned about what kind of speaker cabinet I was bringing with me than I was about whatever head I had.
Because as long as you have an amp that can get somewhere in this range of tone that you can work with, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I haven't really been that picky about the amp part, but I've been picky about the speaker and the speaker cabinet part.
You know what's funny? I just remembered actually that I actually did a bunch of clinics with just a Line 6 pod plugged straight into a PA. With like a backing track.
See, now that feels weird to me because there's no speaker cabinet.
There was no speaker cabinet. No, exactly. But you kind of just, to me, it was all about efficiency. I can just have it in my gig bag and just go walk in and do the clinic, and I don't have to worry about having.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Bringing stuff with me. That kind of, you're not mercy of whatever amp they have. I remember doing a show one time with like a backline that wasn't mine and trying to. It was a Mesa Boogie Stiletto amplifier.
And I wanted to like the Stiletto.
And I remember trying to make it sound like anything, and it was just the worst sounding thing. I was like, okay, fingers, you're going to have to do all the work today, man. You're going to have to make this sound like a real amp. You know what I mean? And I remember the idea of the Mesa Boogie Stiletto was that it's going to be like a Marshall-y Mesa.
Yeah, I remember reading all the propaganda about it before it came out, and I thought, yeah, that's the Boogie I want.
But why did it not sound like anything? I mean, it's just the worst sounding amp I've ever heard.
Who knows? Wow, worse than a Crate?
It made like my Marshall Valve State sound like a god compared to, it was like...
Valve States have their own niche.
But I mean, it's like, it was like you would think from this thing with EL34s, and it's like, it's got 5 preamp tubes. It's supposed to have all this gain. It had no gain, had no punch.
It sounded better than a Crate.
It was one of the worst sounding tube amps I've ever played.
Did it have a power attenuator?
Nope.
Maybe that's why. Maybe if it had a power attenuator, you could have I
tried everything with that amp, man. I tried everything to make it sound good. And I'd played like Tremaverbs before. Those were pretty good. I played the dual rectifiers. They were pretty good. That one was not pretty good. I mean, I like Mesa amps now, but it's like,
well, I mean, I guess
not their finest moment.
I mean, I guess even Mesa Boogie can have a swing and a miss.
That's true. They did.
They
sure did with that. Every amp company's had that, except for maybe Bogner or something like that.
Oh well, like the super boutique.
Yeah, but those are like you're looking at like $6-7 just to start with a Bogner Ubersol.
I mean, again, and hey, if you're a Mesa Boogie and you've got one swing and a miss, that's fine.
Yeah.
Rather than. Like Crate, where it's T-ball and you still can't hit the ball. Which, by the way, that describes my entire athletic history as a child.
That's so funny.
Well, almost. There was basketball, but that's another story.
I feel like, I agree. Crates, there's very little redeemable things about Crate. But yeah, let's just kind of think about, like, okay, at the end of the day, I think nowadays you just have more options than you've ever had. There's great tube amps.
Almost too many.
There's so many great tube amps out there if you want a real amp. There's modeling amps that are like either hybrid with with some tubes in the preamp section and model pretty well. Some are just straight computers with solid state technology. Even the solid state amps are better than they've ever been with more features. You know what I mean?
So the product that I want to see is so my idea of a great modeling amp would be like maybe up to 5 amp models. From clean getting dirtier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get your Fender Twin, you get your Roland Jazz Chorus,
Vox AC30,
like Vox AC30, and then you get like your Marshall
Plexi,
Marshall Plexi, Marshall JCM 800, and then maybe some kind of Soldano-y thing,
Bogner or Soldano, yeah.
And then you'd have to have like a dual rectifier for the 6L6 crowd,
yeah.
That almost seems like too much.
Yeah.
So how's this? So there'd be one that would be like your clean tone modeling amp, and then one would be your dirty tone modeling amp. Now, there'd be at least one usable clean rhythm tone. Maybe put like a Fender Twin model on the dirty one so you could do both.
Mm.
Okay. Then it's got, it has a gain knob, a tone knob, and a master volume knob.
And that's it. Yeah, all the EQs baked into the cake.
Oh, but you know what? But then there would be a cabinet model on it. That would be the thing. So it doesn't come with multi-effects. You don't get like reverbs and delays and flangers and flim-flams and hoo-haws. But you do get, like 212, 112, you get 412, you get 812 full stack.
Yeah.
You get like 410s.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny nowadays.
That would be rad.
Have you heard of IRs? You know what those are?
Impulse responses.
Yeah, exactly. That's become a thing now, where like the amp speaker simulations have gotten incredibly defined.
Yeah, so give me the version of like the Boss Katana or the Black Star Silver Tone, I think they call it. or whatever. It's what the ID core was.
Sure.
And actually, Blackstar kind of did something with the tubes on the ID core series, where you could select different tube models.
So we're talking about 606 EL34.
Yeah, 606s, EL34s,
66s,
EL84s, all that stuff, right? But specifically a combo amp that has impulse responses.
Yeah.
If they could master that, and again, it just comes with one tone knob.
Yeah.
It comes with a resonance knob and a presence knob. You don't actually get any EQ. That would be
make it simple. I mean, I guarantee you, most people with that amp would probably never use a speaker. Though, would just plug it straight in. That'd be like what most people would use it for. Because if it has all the EIRs in it, why even need the speaker?
Man, I've got a student who is an IT guy for the state, and he went and got a Fender Mustang, and I mean the Mustang amp, because Fender likes to call things Mustang.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a guitar, sometimes it's an amp. When they come out with a new product, it's just
it's the Mustang.
Yeah. Yep, it's called the Mustang. Yep.
And once the cease and desist letters from Ford kind of get taken care
of,
can
you imagine the corporate battles between Ford and Fender? Battle of the F Corps.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I straight up told, I'm like, and so that Mustang, it comes with an LCD screen and menus and shit.
Mm-hmm.
He's an IT guy for the state. I said, dude, you're overcomplicating things. He says, that's what I do for a living.
Yeah, don't do that though.
Yeah, don't do that. So I said, listen, man, here's what you need. You need an amplifier that has just one knob on it.
Yep.
That's what you need.
It's a go button.
Yep.
Just go.
Just more or less loudness, and then spend time practicing. So anyway,
that's a good place to start wrapping up there. So I feel like that
was good.
There's no right or wrong when it comes to gear. It's just you got to find what works for you. Although I think the gear that Ryan and I use is the right way. Everyone else is wrong. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Well, our two philosophies kind of run the gamut.
That's true. I'm a kind of a more is more philosophy when it comes to gear, and you're a very like minimalist kind of.
I'm a yes. As Rainbow taught us, I'm straight between the eyes.
That's true. I'm the man on this little mountain. So
yeah. Okay. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in to the. To Scott and Ryan's Rock Guitar Confidential podcast.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Catch you next time.
Peace.